What if the belly fat people call the most stubborn isn't mainly determined by how much you eat, but by one small moment at night, a moment most people never notice and almost never recognize as a biological trigger? For years, fat loss has been framed as a simple equation: eat less, move more. But if that equation worked consistently, the results would be far more evenly distributed. The problem is, the human body doesn't operate like a calculator. It's a living biological system deeply regulated by timing, rhythm, and hormonal sequence. And that's where this conversation begins. Not with what you eat, but with when the body stops receiving energy and starts shifting into maintenance mode. During the day, most people function relatively predictably. Meals are structured, activity is higher. If exercise happens, it usually happens here. But the body doesn't evaluate fat loss hour by hour or workout by workout. That evaluation happens over longer, quieter windows of time. Specifically, whether there's a long enough biological pause to transition from energy intake to repair and stored energy use. At night, there's a narrow metabolic window, and inside this window, the body hormonally decides where metabolism is headed next. Will energy be accessed from storage, or will it remain protected? When this window opens, insulin gradually falls, repair mechanisms rise, and fat, especially visceral fat, becomes available as fuel. But when that window never opens, the outcome is very different. The most common reason isn't a slow metabolism, it's eating too late. Every intake at night, even light snacks or nutritionally neutral foods, still requires an insulin response. And as long as insulin is active, fat burning is not the metabolic priority. This isn't failure, and it's not emotional weakness. It's a biological constraint. The body does not access stored energy while the external energy is still being processed. What makes this hard to notice is that it comes without symptoms. Sleep still happens, and waking up still feels normal. But physiologically, the opportunity to enter nighttime maintenance mode never occurs. In that state, belly fat, especially visceral fat wrapped around vital organs, remains protected as reserve energy. This is why many people feel like their daytime effort doesn't match their results. Not because they're doing something wrong, but because the timing signal is never fully delivered. When night is understood as the deciding phase, fat loss stops being about willpower and starts being about rhythm. At the center of that rhythm is one primary hormone: insulin. Insulin isn't a bad hormone, it performs an essential job, moving energy from food into cells. But while insulin is active, fat burning does not occur. There's no judgment, no preference. That's simply the order of operations. Problems arise when insulin activity extends late into the night. Each additional intake signals that external energy is still available. As a result, the body never transitions into the nighttime metabolic phase designed for repair and stored fuel usage. When eating ends earlier, the hormonal sequence shifts. Insulin completes its role and naturally returns to baseline. This drop isn't an intervention, it's a response to stopping intake. Under these conditions, the body enters maintenance mode. Energy begins to come from internal reserves. This is where the next nighttime hormone becomes relevant: melatonin. Melatonin is often associated with sleep, but its role is broader. It signals the end of the active daytime phase. As melatonin rises, insulin sensitivity falls. Biologically, the body no longer expects incoming energy. When food arrives during this phase, insulin and melatonin send opposing signals. Glucose clearance slows. Excess energy is pushed toward storage, preferentially into visceral fat. There's no sensation attached to this process, but when it repeats, the storage pattern becomes consistent. In contrast, when intake stops earlier, melatonin rises in a low insulin environment. Hormonal signals no longer conflict. Several hours past midnight, if this state is maintained, the body enters a metabolic phase many people rarely reach. In this phase, the primary fuel source shifts from glucose to visceral fat. The liver converts it into ketones, which supply the brain and vital organs during sleep. This process happens silently, but metabolically, it's one of the most efficient fat utilization periods the body has. This phase is fragile. Even small nighttime intake is enough to shut it down, not as punishment, but because the external energy signal reactivates. If low insulin persists, human growth hormone, HGH, rises. In this context, HGH supports tissue repair and muscle preservation, while energy continues to be drawn from fat stores. This is why changes are often reported without loss of functional tissue. After a single night with aligned hormonal sequencing, the following morning often feels different. Hunger is more stable, insulin response is smoother, and energy feels more even. This isn't psychological, it's the continuation of overnight metabolism. That's why morning behavior often reflects the night before. Implementation doesn't require a specific clock time. What matters is a consistent gap between the last meal and sleep. For most people, that gap is around 3 to 4 hours. Consistency matters more than precision. Gradual adjustments are easier for biological systems than abrupt changes. Even nighttime light exposure plays a role, as it influences melatonin release and indirectly affects appetite regulation. This approach doesn't force fat loss, it simply removes the barrier preventing the body from entering its natural metabolic phase. When biological rhythm is respected, fat loss doesn't need extra pressure. It happens as a consequence of proper sequencing. In this context, belly fat isn't an enemy to defeat, it's stored energy used when timing allows. The body doesn't need to be aggressively controlled. It works best when its timing signals are aligned.